Hello out there. My name is Laulu Akode and you are on to Inside Sources. But first, the take segment. And today, we turn it over to our viewers. It's your take, because we believe here that your opinions really matter. Now, these are comments on some of the recent editions of Inside Sources, and it comes from our different social media platforms, especially YouTube. Here we go. The first one says, Nigeria needs Donald Duke. And this is about the interview that we had with the former governor of Cross River State. It's coming from a user that is named VX. He said, another very outstanding Nigerian politician. No criminal record, no EFCC questioning, no ICPC issues. He didn't run to Senate for cover, this commentator says. And then he concludes, then the big question is, why does political parties abandon such individuals like Duke for who he calls drug addicts, criminals, touts, and people of little intellect? Well, I think your words are very strong, but your point is made. He concludes, he says, we need men like this. Next one says, there must be consequences. And this is coming from Andrew Wehis. Andrew Wehis says, a failed state is a nation where there is no credible referee to blow the whistle when government officials hurl, which is currently evident in Nigeria, he says. No accountability, no consequences. We move along. Next one says, Nigerian can flourish. This is coming from Okeowo Olusegun. He says, everything in Nigeria is politicized and badly corrupted. But if the issues of the judiciary system, ineptitude in governance, and lack of consequences for actions within government are addressed sincerely across the board, Nigeria will come out of this coma and Nigeria will flourish. I say amen. Next one says that President Tinubu must revisit his governance approach. And this is coming from Possible O. Julius. He says, I strongly believe that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and others in the corridors of power should revisit their approach to government. They should prioritize developing our local economy, create measures to checkmate the security threats of their continuous seeming failure in their responsibilities to keep the nation safe, reform the judiciary to prosecute corruption of any kind. Then the next one says, a season of political gangsters. This is coming from Johnson Oyibo Ojabo. I am not too sure if there's anything called political elites in Nigeria anymore. What we have nowadays is political gangsterism. Wow. And the next one says, governors must be held accountable. This is coming from Jonathan Kadri. Jonathan Kadri says governors should be held accountable for poor security in Nigeria. The governors get allocations for security, but they keep it for their own use. I think we should add that ultimately, right now, is the federal government that is in charge of security. Next one is about our guest, Mr. Tunji Bello from FCC. He says Nigerians are suffering. He says the president should take action on the petrol and security. Nigerians are suffering, very simply put. Another one is still on the FCCPC boss edition. He said FCCPC should checkmate cement prices. And this is coming from Mr. Ashala Rise. There should be price control to checkmate arbitrary pricing of goods. Please check the price of building materials, especially cement. The next one is about NNPC. It says NNPCL can't fix Dangote petrol price. This is coming from Mr. Domle Agibit. He says NNPCL, a private business, should not be allowed to muzzle Dangote to fix prices. Pricing is a function of input and overhead. But did I hear you say NNPCL is a private company? Not quite. The next one says prioritize local refineries, and it's coming from Mr. Bola Salak. Certain portion of the crude oil should be set aside for local refineries so as to reduce the cost of refined products. But from the guest analysis, that's the guest on the program, Nigerians are in for a real soup. We pray not. And finally, this says, cut down governance cost. It's coming from Mr. Adebayo Yunusa. The cost of governance should be cut down. There is hardship in the land and people are really suffering. Our politicians, our leaders are living large while citizens are suffering. May God give us good leaders. One more, unrealistic petrol price. This is coming from Sukomi Johnson. It is unrealistic to expect the price of PMS to be lower than 700 naira. And we need to approach the issue rationally. As rightly pointed out, the inefficiency of the government and the inefficiencies in the NNPCL, as well as pervasive corruption, they are the root causes of the challenges we are facing as a nation. And there you have it. Inside Sources. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. Now, here we talk about the future of Nigeria, and today we are looking at the future of Nigeria from the economic point of view. And I have with me today an insider in the private sector, somebody that was formerly the chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group between 2015 and 2019. He's also the co-founder of Trans-Sahara Investment, the chairman of Ignite Capital, and several other key businesses and firms in the private sector. I'd like to welcome to Inside Sources, Mr. Kyari Ababuka. My brother, you are welcome to Inside Sources.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right. And thank you for coming. So you're going to be the very first guest who is not a politician or who has not held any political position, because we want to also talk about the future of this country from the economic point of view. So I just like to start from what the president said. The president said he wants Nigeria to have a $1 trillion economy. Now, where things are today, the setting of our economic direction, are we going in the right directions, or how do you assess our trajectory towards that $1 trillion economy?
Thank you for inviting me. Unfortunately, I would need to digress for even 60 seconds.
Please, go ahead.
I come from Maiduguri.
Right.
And the floods is something that has been top of mind. Last night, I was having discussions with some group to see how the private sector can also come together and do something.
Excellent idea.
But anyone watching should also send out their prayers to the people of Maiduguri, but at the same time, to volunteer to do something. It can be giving away, dry food, whatever, anything.
Or accommodate people.
Would really help. So it can be crowd-funded, literally.
Right.
Now, I think one of the fundamental things about vision is that it is nice to have something that would make everybody say, wow, is this possible? So 1 trillion target is a fantastic target. Now, to achieve that by within an X period of time requires certain concerted effort on the part of everybody who has a stake in the country. And by that, I mean everyone, including the citizens. Now, to say that, you have to also demonstrate the roadmap, show it to us, so that it would be easier for us to hold on to it and follow through.
Right.
Now, the key players in the economy are the Minister of Economy, the Minister of Finance, and of course, Coordinating Minister of the Economy. And then some of the other players, the central bank governor, naturally, so both the fiscal and monetary, but then there are ministries like trade and investment.
Right.
Even a sub-sector within the Federal Ministry of Finance, such as customs and the like, need to play a significant role.
Right.
The reason is that, if you ask the average Nigerian, what is the objective of, say, customs? They would probably say it's to generate revenue. But it is ideally set up to facilitate trade. Therefore, technically speaking, when you have all the all the aspects of the economy humming efficiently, then we will see real growth. Right now, at best, we're doing 3%, 3.5% per annum GDP growth. This basically means that if you do the rule of 72 divided by 3, that means that for our economy to double, it would mean that we will have to wait for 67 or so years.
Yes, to
37 or something like that, like half of that
to get
72 divided by 3, which would be 20 something years, right? To double the economy. That means from 400 or whatever we are now, if you double it, it's 800. You're still not even a billion yet.
Right.
And then another 12 years. So that literally means we will have to wait for another 30, 40 years at this growth rate. Now, what will then boost the accelerate the growth? There are some key fundamental things.
Okay.
Foundational in it are the structural elements. Fix energy. By that I mean electricity should be available, because that becomes one of the significant catalysts for economic development and growth. The infrastructure, such as the rails, which takes time, by the way, for the economy. So this infrastructure, such as bridges and roads, must be in good shape. And the ports, because one of the inefficiencies of our port have given rise to the efficiency of the neighboring ports. I don't know if you have been in Cotonou in the last 4 or 5 years. No. I was there a few months ago. Cotonou, every time I go, you can see improvements, visible improvements in infrastructure in that city. And it's a port town. Wow. And when you look at their port capacity and what they have been importing, the joke a friend of mine shared was when he went to Brazil and visited a meat exporting company and asked them, do you export to Nigeria? They looked at that list, said no. And he was baffled. He said, you mean but do you export to Africa? He goes, yes. In fact, West Africa is our largest export within the African zone. Which country? He goes, Republic of Benin. Then he laughed. He said, based on the volume you have stated, if every citizen of that country eats half a cow a day, they won't consume everything, which basically means that it's being transshipped to Nigeria.
So they're using that port
because it's more efficient.
And they're targeting Nigeria.
And with AFCFTA, we might even be looking at a losing battle. So we have to put our acts together. What we say must be followed with what we do. So if we say we are open for business, and then you come to the port and you are being harassed by 6 or 7 different agencies, would you want to do business in that country?
Yeah.
The problem is it's going to be difficult.
When you have another option.
When you have another option where you just make your phone call, you send your way bill, somebody goes there, clears it, no wahala, nothing, seamlessly. And you are off. You've walked out. No demurrage fees. The demurrage fees in Nigeria alone, compared to what we charge for the duties and all of that, is a significant portion. Okay. That means that we have an inefficient handling
of the ports.
By that, it means that you are dragging the economic growth.
Significant.
Because velocity of money is very important. The goods should come in
and go out.
Be disbursed. Goods should go out very quickly. I have seen some clients that have complained to the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform that they have their export items ended up rotting at our ports.
Oh, wow.
And this is a country where we get more imports than exports, which basically means that some of the containers are leaving empty.
When they come.
So why shouldn't we take advantage of that?
Absolutely.
And move out things as quickly as possible?
But yeah, I'm sorry to, because it's quite, these are the problems that we've dealt with over a long period of time.
Right.
So you said in your opening remarks that we need to have a customs service,
correct,
that understands its role as a facilitator,
correct,
and not as a revenue
collecting.
Now, so how do you make that happen? Because it also goes to mindset,
correct,
of even the bureaucracy.
It's part of the culture of corruption, because when from top to bottom you condone corruption, then there won't be anybody who would listen and do the right thing.
True.
Now, if you want to fix the country, you have to punish malfeasance, any sort of malfeasance. When you punish it and publicly show that you're punishing it and you're not tolerating it, human behavior would begin to shift to the place where you would not be punished, right? One. Two is that you also need to put incentives. An entity that generates revenue, or in the case of, say, a country like Singapore, which is really not fair for me to compare with Nigeria, even civil servants get bonuses at the end of the year. Now, what that means is that at the beginning of the year, you get KPIs. You meet those KPIs,
you get a bonus.
You're going to get a bonus at the end of the year. Now, if you treat everybody with that kind of respect and dignity, they would actually deliver, because they know at the end of the day that by delivering and being customer-centric and being efficient, like a private sector mentality, the efficiency level goes up. And by direct correlation of that to the national productivity would begin to show. The growth rate may go from 3 to 7%, because many of the issues we have in our economy are inefficiencies. And some of them are things that can be done with very little, because the people have the competence, they have the capacity to do, then why don't they do it? Because they know that if they delay you and you are in a hurry, you are the ones suffering. So you have to do something about it. And that doing something will now further become a vicious cycle that would continue to compound. Who was it? A friend of mine sent me something that said that the Inspector General of Police of Kenya was given 2 weeks jail term for not obeying court order. So a court jailed the IG. Now, would something like that happen in Nigeria? Because even at the highest office, they would ignore court order. So those sort of things also sends a message. Sends a message to the people that anything goes. And no malfeasance is punished. And therefore, if you're doing it and you have somebody backing you from behind, then you're fine. And that will never amount to a nation that is in a hurry to develop itself.
Correct. Since we are still talking about corruption, the oil and gas sector,
yes,
that's the commanding height of our economy. I used to, people used to say, and it's still very true, that we should use the resources that are available in the oil and gas to transform other aspects of the economy. As a matter of fact, we can use the resources we are getting in oil and gas to make the country to be non-oil.
Correct.
But there's a lot of things happening in the oil and gas sector. I wanted to ask you that, okay, so we talked a lot about the PIA, PIB took a lot of years, and the former speaker, I think the 8th Assembly, that's Right Honorable Dogara,
yes,
was my guest. He was sitting right there. And he said to me that, before the PIB was signed, everybody said that, once there is PIB,
we've reached nirvana.
But that you signed the PIB, is now PIA, we are still where we are. The question, Mr. Booker, is that what is the best way to deal with this opaqueness or the opacity in the oil and gas sector? What are the key reforms that has to happen?
The PIA, as written, would have resolved things if we fully implemented. In Nigeria, people quickly say that when they discover that there is a problem, pass a new law. Meanwhile, you're not even implementing your existing laws. Now, what ideally should have happened long ago, not now. So I'm not blaming anybody for this. I'm blaming us for not doing it in good enough time. And that is that NNPC, as it exists, even though somebody would now say NNPC is now a limited liability company. How? Because it's not behaving like a limited liability company. What is the governance structure? How is it that Petrobras, which is government-owned, Aramco, which is government-owned, and well-managed, even got listed, right? It got listed. But when it listed, it was so huge that only 2.5% was float. So you could buy into it. And today, it is one of the most highly capitalized companies on earth.
That's Aramco.
Aramco. Now, the reason is very simple. The government is not relying on it as a piggy bank. It doesn't go to it as an ATM from time to time. The reverse is the case in Nigeria. When government is in trouble, it looks to NNPC to bail them out. What that means is that if you can't do anything, go out and get NNPC to bail you out. Whereas it's supposed to be an entity separate from government, even though it is MOFI, Ministry of Finance, Inc., that's the investor. And if it were even listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, let's say the government maintains 80% of it, 20% of it goes out, and the board should be made up of more independent non-executive directors, competent, capable people, rather than the executive directors. And they keep the executive directors to task and deliver certain KPIs. And if you don't, you're going to be fired by the board. There won't be any interference. And if you have a Ministry of Petroleum, it should be more looking at the industry as a regulator and as the entity that would lay out the taxation, but the tax collection still rests with FIRS. And if you even if you want the states to be part of this largesse that would come out, it should be the dividends. And the dividend would be coming into the federation account and be disbursed to everybody according to the formula or whatever. And by listing it, if it is valued at its true value, just what Saudi did was to actually have 2% or 2.5% for somewhere in the order of 100 or 100 and something billion dollars. Right there, you've got enough to build your country. And Saudi and some of the Middle Eastern countries are trying to move away from oil. Today, one of the largest tech startup ecosystem outside of Silicon Valley is probably UAE.
True.
Between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And the reason is that they said we are open for business. And they are injecting money into startups, tech startups, non-oil and gas. And the interesting thing is that I'm a closet angel investor. There were two young Nigerians who came and pitched in my house. Both of them are now living in UAE. They got funded because they couldn't get enough funding in Nigeria. This was like 5-6 years ago. One of them is into drones. He moved to UAE. Immediately he moved. I don't remember. I think when I bumped into him, the first round, he raised about $3 million or so.
Oh, wow.
And the rest is history. So essentially what that means is that they don't care where you're coming from, as long as you're going to come there and build.
Yes, build.
Yeah, and it is global in nature, because the technology you have and the entrepreneurial pursuit, even for some of the tech guys starting up here in Nigeria, it benefits everybody. Flutterwave is now all over Africa and in the US, and so on and so forth. So what you do is that we have to have that, that approach to everything with intentionality. Shouldn't be an accidental success. It should be deliberate.
Right.
And we need to build the economy in that manner. So I think it's just a combination of things, really. Yeah.
But while we are at the issue of, and I like the fact that you brought the fintechs.
Yeah.
So one of the things that have actually turned out quite impressive is the fact that I think maybe about 4 or 5 of the fintech companies in Africa, that have actually become unicorns are from Nigeria.
Yes.
Flutterwave, Opay,
right,
and then
quite a number of them.
Yes. Now, so that tells a story of potential that has actually become, possibility, and then it tells the story of the ingenuity of the Nigerian people. It tells the story of people being ready to do what was to happen.
Correct.
My question to you then is that how can we take that model that we have seen in the fintech, that has led to the development of the unicorns?
Correct.
Which means a business that is worth $1 billion.
Yes.
So that's not a joke.
It's not a joke.
So we have about 5 of them. They are worth $1 billion. That's a big success story. You agree?
Correct.
How was, first of all, help us, our viewers to understand, how was that possible? And then what does it suggest? What model has it shown us of what can happen in
Nigeria? Yes, indeed. I also made recommendations to the committee that I told you I was on, because my subcommittee was on fiscal competitiveness and economic growth.
Okay.
Now, the thing about the startup culture, I came from Silicon Valley. I used to work for Hewlett Packard.
Yes.
And HP. And in Silicon Valley, it is just the culture of that environment. It's a less than 20 square miles, has more PhDs than anywhere on earth. And all the PhDs are not in poetry or literature. It's all in STEM fields. And the idea for a chip design comes out of there. The manufacturing can take place somewhere
else,
but the ideas are all there.
And this in California.
In California, Bay Area. Now, why is it that there is a concentration of those sorts of human beings there versus anywhere else on earth? It's because there was a deliberate effort to attract them. And there is the entrepreneurial spirit. Now, there are models. The best one that I shared with most people that are willing to care about, and by the way, I also chair a venture capital fund.
Okay.
Ventures platform. Kola, I know, is the managing partner. I have to plug him in. And one of our early investors is a company that was into agri-tech. Not even what you would call a fintech, because we had invested in a fintech that ended up being acquired by Stripe. It was called Paystack. We invested in Paystack, and they were acquired for $200 million within 3 years of our investment. And that was a fantastic exit. But the beauty of it is that these guys started these companies, reached out for mentoring, and a little bit of angel capital. And then as soon as you advise them to register out of Delaware, or the parent company register it out of Delaware, then you can attract investors from any part of the world. And that is the going thing with many of the technology startups in Nigeria, by extension, within the African continent. Now, they see gaps, they see inconveniences, and they can deploy technology to solve those and fill these gaps. Now, what is needed is capital. Some of them need as little as $1 million, which just sounds like a lot of money. For a startup, it's very quick to burn it initially until the idea becomes a product, and then the product meets the market needs, and then the market adapts it. And, 2, 3, maybe 4, 5 years, it starts to look like traction is taking, and then other larger investors will now see it and start to put money in. And that's why you hit that sweet spot of being a unicorn. Maybe 1 out of 100 may become a unicorn. Now, what we can do in the country as a matter of policy is to say that we will encourage innovation, we will invest in innovation, and we will make it easier for others to invest in innovation. If you do that, you would go there. A country that started this some 20 years ago was Chile. So Chile started something called Startup Chile. And what they did was to say, anybody from any part of the world can come to Chile, we'll give them permanent residency, and we will invest $100,000 as grant. They will not even take equity in you.
Oh, wow.
They just give it to you. But you have to be in the country, and you have to be in that ecosystem that they have created. And of course,
their whole Silicon Valley.
What are they talking about? By the time 5, 10 foreign startups show up there, there is also theirs that are coming up, and they would be pairing. You are networking with each other, because entrepreneurial pursuit is not a one-man business.
No.
It's not a one-man game. It's a collaborative, networked game. And by doing so, Chile first set aside $5 million for this.
Oh, wow.
$5 million every year for 5 years. By the 6th year, they doubled it to $10 million.
And that's from where they get the $100,000 each.
Yeah. And so by the 10th year, Chile has produced a few unicorns. Some of them went to the US, but they are still Chilean companies and Chilean citizens. And a co-founder that is Chilean and a foreigner, the founder, and whatever,
Right, yeah.
So the dynamics was shifting. Jobs are being created. The ecosystem was expanding. Most of the countries, including Malaysia, UAE, name them, all copied from the Startup Chile model.
Oh, wow.
So these guys, we just discussed UAE earlier.
Yeah.
It didn't come out of the blues. They saw an example that a middle income country has done that rivals Silicon Valley. And by so doing, by copying that model, it became very successful for them in the countries like UAE, Indonesia, Malaysia, where Chile now is putting down close to $50 or $100 million now.
Oh, wow.
That thing which they started with $5 million. The reason is that their economy had benefited. Identity, management, all kinds of things that have come out. Because when you encourage innovation, it's a game changer. When you start encouraging innovation within the country, young kids who see problems can come with solutions that are dealt with by the technology rather than brute force. And by so doing, people will now begin to say, I would rather be an entrepreneur than to go and work in the ministry or whatever. And it's a cultural thing. Whereas in Nigeria, even now, people are still looking for a job when they finish university.
Very important
unfortunately.
point. Very important point because, if you look at even what some of the big players in that tech area, Zuckerberg came to Nigeria and a few of them, and they were quite excited about the enthusiasm of the Nigerian youth, about the numbers.
Correct.
So my question to you is that how can, and we have a pretty smart guy now, as the Minister for Innovation and, what's the name of the ministry? Minister of
Digital Economy, yes. Digital Economy, yes.
That's
Bosun Tijani.
Mr. Bosun.
Yes.
Now, how can we have a situation where, because we have the numbers,
yes,
a large portion of our population, they are young people, and they seem to be very eyes wide open. How can we have a situation where you will get their skills become global, like India?
Correct.
When I was in the US,
yes,
and I wanted to pay my mortgage, maybe I have to ask a question. I live in New York.
Right. When you call the number,
the people who pick my phone are Indians.
Indians, exactly.
So,
business process outsourcing.
Yeah. And then, of course, then we later understood the fact that, well, look, they are in IT, they are ahead in digital. How can we have a situation where, and I'm sure it has started, but how can we make it something that will change this idea of, people waiting, looking for jobs?
Correct. I think quite a number of things. I've gone through the strategy document of the minister when he first came into office.
Right.
It's a good document. Now, there are pieces, what I call the rails of the ecosystem that must be built. And by the 3MM is fine, 3 million skilled, tech-skilled, individuals or youth. That's a good goal to start with.
Okay.
You need to also create ecosystems all over the country, if possible. And that requires a bit of investment from government. Private sector may not sit down and open an incubation hub that is not theirs.
Except there are incentives.
Except there are incentives. A large company that is technology-driven and technology-led may sponsor students and what have you, and then they may do their own hackathon or whatever. But those are 1-2 things that are happening across various sectors within the tech space.
Okay.
But if you have a well-built hub attached to maybe universities, because you've lived in the US, you go to North Carolina, the Raleigh, the Tri-City area,
right?
You see that it's actually a technology hub,
right?
And it's deliberate because there are universities, NC State, NC, UNC, and the rest around that Drake, around that corridor. And the reason is that certain fields, they specialize in certain fields, probably statistics, SPSS, and all of those statistical packages came out of that corridor. You see IBM, you see HP, you see Oracle, you see all the buildings, right?
Yeah.
But they're embedded within that uni community, and it's a technology park. The state attracted these companies by offering them tax incentives. And by so doing, you now have a ready intellectual capital that you can harvest, the students and grad students who are doing their PhDs and all of that in the specialized fields that you need. And so there is an industry academic collaboration that happens that becomes catalytic in nature. And it is from there that the entrepreneurs come out. Last year I was at Wharton Business School. One of the case studies we did, and the founders came by to sit in on the case study. They were 2 graduates out of the Wharton Business School. They went out and started selling glasses. I think it's Wabi something. It was amazing. I mean, we know that glass frames are something that can be very, very expensive.
Yeah.
they basically brought it down to the bottom of the pyramid.
Wow.
So essentially, you could actually have your frame go with your outfit every day if you want, because they are so cheap.
Yeah.
I think they're selling it for $20 or whatever. Yeah. And they just blew out. And
from there,
it was an online shop before. And even now, I think most of their sales come from the online channel. And so the game sometimes is that, you look for the problems, you come up with your own solution, test it in the market.
Yeah.
And by testing, it means you've gotten product market fit, a validation. And then you go look for investors who would back you, and the rest is history. But in a place like here, we need the government to be catalytic. It needs to do what Chile did. You may not see a return, $5 million every year. In the case of Nigeria, it's so big, maybe $20 million every year.
Interesting.
And you do it consistently without stopping. 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, you see the benefit beginning to have a multiplier effect.
You served as the chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, which is where the federal government and the private sector come together to discuss economic policy and see how they can both, collaborate. Now, based on your experience, what is the best format for government, especially the federal government, to relate with the private sector? Now, when I served the Buhari Osinbajo administration,
right.
And the president just said, no, you know what, I don't want private sector people in my economic management team.
Right.
Before him, President Jonathan said, yes, bring them in.
Bring them in.
Now, President Tinubu says, bring them in. Which works better for the overall interest of the country. Now, the argument of President Buhari is that, look, you don't need private sector making policy for us. We make policy, we listen to them, we create an avenue for them to come and tell us about their ideas. But the day-to-day management of that policy should not involve, so which one do you think works better for the Nigerian project, all of us, not just private interests?
When I was chairman of the NESG, we did quite a number of things. But aside from even being the chairman, I was on the board before I became chairman.
Yes.
And I continue to be on the board now after
you exited as chair.
After I exited as chair and came back. The thing that I can say about the NESG is that it assists in having a dialogue between the public sector and the private sector. And it also has policy commissions. It used to be 13. We've now shrunk it to about 8 or so.
Okay.
And the outcome of the summit and those policy deliberations during the course of the year become recommendations that we share with government. The reason is very simple. When you're making policy for the economy, especially things that have to do with the economy, the participants in that economy is crucial. Their input is very important. Now, if you become flippant as a public sector leader, let's say the president, and says, look, we don't need them. Let's listen to them. We might even suspect that you are not listening to us. And you go and come up with a policy. And if the policy is detrimental to the economy, you won't know, but the players know. And the players would either leave the country, go somewhere else, in some instances, or they will find ways of overcoming the issues that this may raise in the economy. And in the process, you might find unsavory behaviors. They may not strictly comply with it, or they look for loopholes to avoid whatever they feel is inconvenient. Now, the counter to that is where a policy was recommended or made in conjunction with them. Something that you help build even if it is inconvenient, you would say we are part of the decision-making process, and therefore we have to live with it. So that's my quick one. But the most important thing is not just the model of having an economic management team. It's fine, whatever you call them. I like for a president to have what I would call a Council of Economic Advisors. Now, the Council of Economic Advisors ought not to be bureaucrats. Shouldn't be somebody from any of the ministries. Maybe a minister because he's coming from outside, but not a PAMSEC, who is actually a person who executes policies. He's not a policy maker. Technically speaking, it's the minister that's supposed to be the policy maker.
Yeah.
And
on behalf of the president.
On behalf of the president. So the president is the policy maker. And if you have a policy advisory council of some sort, call it a Council of Economic Advisors, whatever. And what you need are a combination of academics and industry. The reason is that economics as a subject is a complex subject. You get a few PhDs that are tested, that have written papers, that have made presentations globally, well known. And you now bring in part of the industry.
People who
the problem with getting only top industry players is the problem of agency theory. They may do something that would benefit themselves rather than the entire economy. So there is a danger there. So you have to balance it. You bring in the academic. Even within the industry, you maybe look at it from a sectoral aspects or whatever. And then an organ like NESG or the Nigerian Economic Society or whatever can also be sounding board to the president when it comes to policy formulation. And when something is new, it's nice for him or her to throw it out to those think tanks. They can advise. They can go and get examples from other jurisdictions. No idea is unique, by the way.
True.
Especially when it comes to national economy. And an entity like NESG have partnerships with various entities globally. In South Africa, Brazil, US, Europe, India. So we hear from one another. And that's why it's a think tank. We spend money on these PhD economics who are part of our also economic advisory organ, where the chair and the co-chair are all academics. Now, so we're not just coming out with these suggestions out of the air, thin air. We're doing it after we look at the facts and its evidence-based recommendation. Whereas if you are hijacked or there is a state capture, it may be industry-driven recommendation, which may favor one industry versus another.
Okay, all right, thank you. Last question. There's so much hardship in the country to the point that we even had last month a series of days of protest, and then of course, it's also been about 15 months since the president took over. So how will you rate the Bola Ahmed Tinubu presidency, so far? And then I want you to look at the hardship in the land, the protests, and the way the government is responding and managing all of that.
There is a lot of anxiety in the country. Anxiety, and economically speaking, there is also a lot of hunger. And people have become violent. People are saying things that they ought not to be saying. And all of those are tied to a few of the policy stands that we started very early on. the fuel subsidy removal, and of course the harmonization of the exchange rates. Both of them are good policies if it had been done in a more informed manner. My own take on fuel subsidy removal is to truly remove fuel subsidy gradually over a period of time. I had made that recommendation previously, and I will continue to stand by it. It is the parable of the boiled frog. You know, you throw a frog in a hot water, it jumps out. You put it in cold water and you raise the temperature gradually it adapts. So even if you're increasing fuel price by 5% every six months, it will not be felt as we did
at least not radically
recently. And even there, it was just the fuel price, the PMS price was frozen, and that doesn't mean that you've removed subsidy. The government was paying the subsidy. Somebody would say, well, it's NNPC is paying it, or the government is paying it, but somebody is paying it.
Exactly. And it's a public fund.
Exactly. These are monies that could go into what we've just discussed: education, healthcare, infrastructure, etc.
Technology.
200-300 billion every month is being spent. Higher even, as we saw some of the numbers that Nigerian Bureau of Statistics showed. Now, that's one. The second is that of the harmonization of the exchange rate. You know, as long as people can actually get access to exchange rate when they need, FX when they need it, that's fine. But if you even completely, totally liberalize it, the currency would not have moved in the fashion, in the manner in which it had moved. And then the unintended consequences of those policy pronouncements should have been studied and those recommendations shared with Mr. President before he goes on the podium to say it. So something was missing, in all honesty. You have to advise your principal to basically carry the nation with him. The vision may be right, but the approach and execution or implementation was horrible. The second thing is that once this has happened, there is no going back. However, what are the counter effects to uplift the most vulnerable
of our people?
And those need to have been done urgently. There are technologies that we have in this country that can actually reach every individual if we want to. BVN, NIN, the like. And then either give them vouchers or whatever. You don't have to necessarily give them Naira and Kobo in notes.
In notes, yeah.
It can be electronic.
Yeah.
It can come into their phone, whatever, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it would be efficient. You will not even leave room for the malfeasance we talked about.
In the middle of the
Because when people see huge sums of money being given away,
they're tempted.
But if it is electronically disbursed, no one would even know that money has come into, their account, because it's going directly to them. And you can trace it and you can audit it.
Yeah.
And if that were to have happened, we would see the effect in the economy. Yeah, the economy might the GDP growth might slow down, but when there is money circulating and goods and services are being purchased and money is circulating, it will have a positive effect generally on the economy.
All right.
So the sufferings would have been abated.
Okay, I mean, I wish we had more time to keep talking, Mr. Bukar. It's been a very exciting conversation with you. Thank you for your contributions, and thank you for your continuous service in the private sector. And I'm sure that you are still engaged, even as a member of the board of NESG. And we hope and believe that our nation we inch towards that greatness that we all believe is our destiny. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right. And that's another edition of Inside Sources. Like we say, Nigeria will prevail. We will ensure it because we will keep talking about it. And we know that we will get the break one day. Thank you so much. My name is Laudo Akondi, and I see you at the next edition.